Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint this beautiful scene. Well, the scene's beautiful. My painting is okay. Of these boats in the water. It looks very Greek or Italian, just someplace warm and Mediterranean-ish, and someplace I wish I was right now. We're enduring the never-ending winter in Maine. It's been raining for weeks. It's just very awful. So it's really hitting me hard this week. This video is brought to you by jerrysartorama.com. I'll be using the Berlin water mixable oils today. They're an affordable brand of paints, and they have like soap and water cleanup. So it's really nice if you're like me and you are working in your home. You know, you don't want oily rags, solvent rags in your trash. You don't want the smells. You don't want all of that baloney. So this just makes it a lot easier. I've got the introductory 10 color set, which is wonderful. I'm just using up the white today, but you can get individual tubes. And actually I got a big tube of white water mixable oils in the Permabella range to supplement this because I knew I would run out of white before anything else. The pigment strength is really good on these paints too, so you know, so little goes a long way. I like to do my sketch in oil pastel. These are just the Pentel Oil Pastels. They are probably the best deal going as far as an inexpensive pastel. And I like it because any of my lines, my sketch is going to dissolve into my paint. Now, this device here I'm using is a tube wringer. And I like to use that when I'm getting towards the end of the paint, or if I'm using like those tiny little tubes of watercolor. Look how flat I can get that tube. It's great because you don't waste a drop. And I've actually been saving my empty tubes for about a year to make a collage with, so I'm not throwing that away. I'm gonna put it in my I have a basket and it's all like items to be collaged. Oh, that's what you do if you've got those hoarder tendencies. You just try to corral them a little bit, and I have a collage in the making of that, so I don't feel too bad about it. You can see that I'm only taking out small little bits of paint. That's because the pigment strength, like I mentioned, is so good that I don't have to worry about putting out a big bunch, and I hate wasting leftover paint, so I try to just take out a little bit. I've adjusted my easel so that I can be looking at it without having to kind of crane my neck over. It takes me longer to paint in oils than it does watercolors, so you know, so I want to be comfortable. I made the mistake of adding a little bit too much water into my paint here, and you can see I've almost got a wash, so I'm just wiping off the excess water in my brush and adding some more paint to it. I love the consistency of the Berlin oils. I knew I had a tube of cerulean somewhere, but I couldn't find it, so I grabbed my Winsor & Newton Artisan water mixable oils, and that paint, and mine is older, it just feels so much stiffer and drier. So if you've tried water mixable oils in the past and you weren't happy with the consistency of it, try them again. They've gotten a lot better over the years, and these Berlin ones are definitely budget friendly. So if you saw the weird consistency on my palette, that's because I used a Winsor & Newton Artisan. But I like the Berlins. They're so creamy, and the consistency right out of the tube is really good. So since I put that toned wash of the blue-gray, which was cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of burnt umber, I'm adding in my clouds now with just a pure white using a filbert, a rounded tip filbert brush. This type of painting is called alla prima, or meaning all at once, which means I'm pretty much painting everything in one layer. So it doesn't really matter if I want to add some water into my paints to make it glide or whatnot, because everything's wet together and it's going to dry together. But if I want to go in, let this dry, and go over with layers, then I want to use the paint with less water added, or just kind of straight, or with an oil medium. I get a lot of questions about mediums. I typically don't use mediums with water mixable oils, probably because I don't spend a ton of time on my paintings with water mixable oils, and quite frankly I don't think I have any mediums for the water mixable, but I could use traditional oil mediums with them. They're just going to require solvent to clean them up. So so if you're kind of getting your feet wet in the water mixables and you're afraid that you're not going to like them, you can use them with your traditional oils and your traditional oil mediums, but just keep in mind that you're not going to be able to soap and water wash it. You're going to need to clean it with a little solvent, then do your soap and water wash. I knew the sky needed a little bit more purpley in the shadows, so I did take some crimson and ultramarine blue and mix it into my gray there, and I want some smaller clouds down near the horizon, so I used a smaller filbert brush for this. I really like filbert brushes when I'm oil painting because it gives you the softness of a round brush, but it gives you the firmness and the control of a flat brush. So highly recommend. If you don't have any, just give a couple a try. Now the brushes mostly that I'm using today are Mimic synthetic hog brushes. So that one right there is a Roland Langnickel Soft Touch. Traditional hog, but the synthetic hogs have gotten really good. Now I used to predominantly get the traditional hog brushes because they're so resilient. If I use synthetic like Taklon brushes, they would just get ruined so quickly that I was putting brushes in the landfill all the time, so I figured having a hog brush that would last me a lifetime was a much better investment. I still have those hog brushes in my collection. I'm not going to throw them away, but I did recently get some Mimic synthetic hog brushes, and I have to say I really like them. They're robust, they push the paint around. I haven't noticed any splitting or fraying or wear to the brushes that's going to make them wear out quicker than a traditional hog brush. So if you're looking for a nice robust synthetic brush that will be comparable to your hogs, I definitely would give them a try. Now they're not any cheaper than hog brushes typically. Generally when you're looking at like a sable brush, synthetic sable is going to be a lot cheaper, but hog brushes are not that expensive to begin with, so the synthetic hogs really aren't that much different in price. But if you want to if you want to limit the amount of animal products in your art, they're definitely a great solution for that. So I think that's wonderful as long as you're not throwing brushes away more frequently. And they're a nice brush to paint with. Just, like any brush, clean them and take care of them and they'll last you a lifetime. I haven't had to replace any of my oil painting brushes or any of my watercolor brushes. I mean, eventually like a sharp pointy watercolor might go dull, but then you can always use them for like texturing effects, or you can even use them in oil paints, like put them to your oil paint stash. Just don't use them with watercolor again and you're going to be fine. So the only brushes I feel like I ever really need to replace are my acrylic painting synthetic brushes. But I don't paint with acrylics very often. I'm usually using those for acrylics and gouache. Gouache is so benign on your brushes. So, I mean, I generally don't have to replace brushes. That's probably why my brush stash is a little out of control. So I don't mind buying a good brush because I'm going to take care of it and I'm going to last. A lot of artists say they're horrible on their brushes, so they just buy cheap ones. I think that's a false economy, and it doesn't take long to take care of your brushes. So what I'm doing here now is I'm blocking in some buildings that are along the waterway. I just want to have that very abstract. Really the focal point of this painting for me is the water. I was kind of stressed this week. I was having a very anxiety-filled week, and topping it off with just the gloomy weather that we've had for the past, I don't know, 8 months. When did it start? October. It's been really hitting me hard. So I'm like, I need to control you cannot control what happens to you. You can only control how you react to it. And that's life, right? You can't control what happens to you. You can control how you react to it, and how you react to your life, to the weather, to whatever it is that's freaking you out. It's 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And I'm just telling myself that because I tend to make a mountain out of a molehill. I will take something trivial and I will get like obsessed. I'm sick of being like that. So I'm taking control and painting some sunny gondolas and imagining myself drifting off into the calm sea and in the warmth and the sunshine, because, we'll have sun sometime. Actually, it's sunny today as I'm recording this on Sketchbook Sunday. I'm going for a walk as soon as I'm done recording, and I'm going to get some vitamin D and, take control. Probably should take control with some vitamin D supplements. I was really low a couple of years ago, and it does a number on you. My doctor said it's impossible to get enough vitamin D in the winter in Maine. So there you have it, folks, in the Northern Hemisphere. You might want to consider that. I'm putting some foliage. Boy, that was like a random tangent. I'm putting some foliage in. I'm just dabbing in some phthalo green. I got a little bit of... I think I put a little ultramarine blue in there to kick it back a little bit because I wanted it cool and far away. I'm putting some reflections on the water. So like when I'm doing the water with oils, I block it in, and then I go in and I add my reflections with the white. It's going to be reflecting the boats, reflecting the sky. I mean, I do have some of the reflections from the buildings in there. I blocked those in with oil paints, but I'm putting the reflections in with a white. I want my reflections to be chunkier towards the bottom of the canvas. That's going to be closer to the viewer, near the boats there. And then I want them smaller and more just kind of shimmery further away, so you get that sense of scale. It's the same thing I did with the clouds, like where I switched to my smaller brush doing the clouds close to the horizon. That's because the horizon is going to be the furthest away from you, and stuff closer to the top of the canvas and bottom of the canvas is closer to you, and that's going to give you the depth. So just kind of keep that in your mind while you're working. If you feel like your painting is flat, just think about the top and the bottom of your canvas and ask yourself if those items are bigger. So a funny thing, I was going to put all these clips together because I did not narrate it while I was painting. This was my moment of zen for the week because I was so stressed out. Coloring on wood slices and painting in oils, that was my zen. Girl's got to get her zen on for the week. Apparently when I'm not like narrating and I'm not worried about filling the time, I'll just like wander away and leave the camera running. There were like a few times I was like, wow, this took me 2 hours to paint. Didn't feel like it. There was like clips where it's just like minutes on minutes on minutes, nothing happening. I must have just like wandered off to answer the phone or let a cat in or something. I just completely forgot to turn the camera off. Anyway, I thought that was amusing. You probably don't. Okay, white is so strong when you're working with oil paints. So what I'm doing here with these boats is I went and put my shadows in first, and then I go in with a brush with a white on it and I go and blend it out. Another tip, I'm going to link the reference photo down below, or try to remember to. I will eventually if I don't right away. I was just looking at the photo from Unsplash on my computer screen. That's how I like to reference my work. And I was just thinking these are going to be hollowed out like canoes kind of. But then when I zoomed in, I could see there's almost like little, there's like a flat deck kind of to them. And then it looks like this little spot like that's inside, like where they store things, where you could like, I guess somebody could sit in there or something. So when I'm painting this right now, in my first session, I am painting them as if they're hollowed out. And then when I zoomed in on the photo, which I did to do my finishing touches, you'll see in a few minutes, then I could see what was really going on. So that's one of the wonderful things about pulling up the photo on your computer screen, is that you can zoom in. You could do that on your phone. I can't work from my phone. It's just too small. But I know some of you young whippersnappers out there with eagle eyes could probably work from your phone and zoom in just fine. But I like to just kind of zoom in on my computer screen, and it really does help seeing details. But the other thing that's really great about not zooming in, about having it just kind of small, you're looking at like a thumbnail, not even a thumbnail, but you're not zoomed in on anything. You're looking at the whole scene. Is that you can break it down and simplify it because you're not seeing every single little detail. If you're out painting on location, which is something I love to do when it gets warm enough that my hands don't freeze to death when I'm outside. Softball game, freezing rain yesterday. It was awful. Anyway, but Mainers play softball in the rain, and that's... I'm grumpy. Oh my gosh, I'm so grumpy about the weather. But if you can, if you can stand back and you can take everything in the big picture rather than focusing on the details to begin with, that is very helpful when you're painting. As is with life. Don't focus on the tiny little detail and get yourself all panicked and stressed out when look at the big picture. It's life imitates art, art imitates life. I'm coming to so many breakthroughs as I narrate this to you guys today. I don't know if it'll be useful to anybody else, but it's helping me anyway. So looking at the big picture, maybe even taking that photo you're working from and making it small, making it black and white, whatever can simplify it for you. Making it black and white's a great idea because then you get the values and you can see what's lighter and darker because your values will make or break a painting. If you could have, I could be painting this in purple and green and chartreuse, but as long as I had those values right, it would look good. That's why you can be colorblind and still be a heck of an artist because it's values that makes a difference instead of, instead of colors for the most part. And I'm still trying to hollow out these, and I'm thinking of them as canoes and seats on them because I didn't zoom in and I was kind of letting my imagination take over. Instead of painting what was really there, I was painting what I thought was there. And that's not necessarily bad. But I did notice that I didn't have enough information, and when I was looking back at this after I finished kind of the first session of this painting, I was kind of disappointed in how it had come out. I actually started this on Friday, and I finished it on Sunday. So so it's not truly like my typical Sketchbook Sunday picture, but I think it helps. It helps to take a step back, whether it's going and getting a cup of tea and coming back to it in 20 minutes, or it's, you know, coming back the next day. It does help to get a little bit of space there. And also something else that I've noticed is that with oils, just overnight the shine can be taken off and it can be a lot easier to see. Sometimes you have a lot of glare when you're first painting, and that can be problematic when you're trying to determine value and you're trying to see how it really looks. Add some depth and shadow into the water. I'm using a mix of the phthalo green, I'm using a little bit of crimson, alizarin crimson, and some quite a bit of ultramarine blue, and it gives me a nice transparent dark that is not going to muddy up in the water. So that's what you want to kind of, you will have some transparent colors in oils, crimson, phthalo blue, phthalo green, any colors that would be transparent in watercolor are probably transparent in oils. So keeping your cooler versions of colors will help you avoid mud, and keeping transparent colors will help you avoid mud. That's why white kind of overtakes, because it's opaque and a lot of the other colors are transparent. And you don't think of that when you're thinking of a additive process like oils and acrylics, but it definitely does apply. You're gonna have some transparent acrylics, you're definitely gonna have some transparent oils. I think that's why I like oils so much, because similar to watercolor, they have that just luminosity. Like you can take a oil paint and add some linseed oil to it and come up with sheer glazes that can bring depth and life to a painting, and I just really like that. Taking a little yellow ochre, I think I had a little bit of cad and lemon yellow just to brighten up some of the foliage. And then I decided to take a break because I was afraid things were getting muddy, and I definitely didn't know where I was going with the boats. So now I'm coming back the next day, and I've zoomed into my reference photo, and I could see that there's actually kind of like a hull, like a below deck area, like a storage kind of area there, and I wanted to kind of look at that information a little bit more and focus in on that and some of the other details on this painting. So I'm making that dark area is kind of the hole under the kind of the floorboards of it, and then I just kind of put the line where the floorboards and the side of the boat meet. So I think these are probably the kind of boats like those gondolas that you have somebody standing up and paddling, and then you might have people sitting in the back. So that's from the information that I had. That's what I was trying to paint, and I'm also just I'm actually just painting what I see, because I know I don't know enough about the subject to wing it. And I really liked how there was kind of a two-tone color there. There was some blue underneath the ridge of the boat, of the edge of the boat, and I wanted to get that in there. I'm working on canvas panel because I didn't want to have the pressure on myself to be on a nice stretch canvas or a birch panel or something like that, and be like, or a cradle panel, you know. I didn't want to have like, oh, this is so precious, I only have a couple of them and I better not waste it. So I went for a inexpensive 11 by 14 canvas panel that if it turns out to be beautiful, I can pop it in a frame and hang it up, and if not, then it's not going to take very much space in my portfolio or in the fire pit, if I want to be completely honest, because I usually do a good old art burn every year. I know that sounds, some people think that's horrifying, but man, you know, having a pile of paintings that you're not really that happy about sitting in your studio does not make you feel good. At least not me, anyway. I do tend to be a little impulsive, but I never regret it. So I guess it's good. So at this point of the painting, I am just trying to add in some details that I think will add to the picture and not detract from it. Anytime you see my arms reaching in front of the painting, it's because I am zooming in. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but thought you might think that was kind of weird. But I am moving it around, looking in depth at different portions of these boats, because I'm not very familiar with boats. So I wanted to, you know, really get a good close look and see what I was dealing with here. So like I mentioned, they've got the hull underneath where they stow stuff, or I guess people could sit. Then there's the floorboard area. I also noticed that there was some like ropes and stuff that I want to kind of figure out what to put in. But first, before I do any of the detail, I just want to make sure I get the shadows and highlights right, because I don't want to try to go in and put shadows around objects. I want to get those in right off the bat. Now these little, I think they're like little floats or buoys or something on the side. Those are really interesting, and I think they add a nice rhythm and repetition to the painting. So I'm putting those 4 on the boat furthest to the left, mainly because I have room and it's kind of facing the viewer a little bit more, so you'd be able to see them. They wouldn't be as foreshortened as they would on the other boats. There's some foreshortening, obviously they're all the same size, but as they move around the edge of the boat and get further from you, they appear squatter. So I just like that kind of like fading off perspective, so I want to put that in there. And I also liked the little like hangers or ropes that are hooking them to the side of the boat, and I think that adds a nice element, helps define the size of the boat a little bit and define the form of it. So I wanted to get that in as well on those floats. The small brushes I'm using are the Black Swan by Mimic. They are a faux red sable brush, and they are excellent for oils. They're firmer than their faux sables for watercolor. They've got shorter, brighter bristles that push the paint out really well and also carry a nice sharp edge. So they're not very expensive either. I highly recommend them for your finishing stages of your oils or water mixable oil paintings. I don't know about if they might be a little delicate for acrylics. Just make sure you wash them really well if you're going to use them with acrylics. Acrylics are such brush killers. So, you know, I don't paint in acrylics very much. I much prefer oils or watercolors, but you definitely could use them, just, you know, care for them. They'd probably be good in gouache as well. Now these are long handled. All the brushes I'm using are long handled, but I've got my work on a table easel, so I'm not like poking myself in the face with them or anything. So if you are going to be sitting flat at the table, you may want to consider a short handled brush. I don't know if the hogs come short handle, but I've sawn off my brushes before if I wanted them to be short handle. So that's something you can always do. Would seal up the end just to protect the wood a little bit more. But that's not a big deal. For some reason, I don't seem to have the problem of leaving my brushes in water, like if they're like oil brushes, because I tend to, like, I rinse off the extra paint and then I wash them. Watercolor brushes, for some reason, I guess because I think watercolor's not gonna hurt them, I'll leave them in their water sometimes. So I try to find watercolor brushes that have the acrylic handles, but with oil painting brushes you're going to be finding the wood handled ones, so you know, just don't leave them in your water even though it's water mixable paint. The nice thing about working on a panel is that you can move your easel and your canvas around, and makes it easy for you to reach all the way to the edges when you're painting. I was feeling like this boat over on the edge here was a little weird. It's more of a speed boat than a paddle boat, and I felt like it kind of didn't quite fit in. So in order to tie it in a little bit more, I put in some of the floats like the boat all the way on the left-hand side head to kind of bookend the painting or the image here. So I decided to keep the floats white, even though the boat's white, and it wasn't going to stand out a ton, because I didn't want to draw attention to that boat. That one is not my favorite. I kind of hemmed and hawed whether I was going to put it in or not, but I liked it in there in the sketch. I thought it gave it a nice perspective where you had the boats all kind of pointed to that center vanishing point. I thought it was kind of interesting. But to tie it in, I added the buoys. I also added some ropes because some of the other boats had some ropes there, and I knew that was going to help harmonize it a bit. Now, I like to suggest things in paintings because the viewer can take from it what they want, and I can take from it what I want as the artist. And so those little red kind of, I suggested umbrellas along the waterfront there by the buildings. I thought it would be nice if there was little cafes and seating, or maybe a little festival. You know, somebody sitting out there sipping a glass of wine, watching the boats go by. You know, I wanted to get that feeling of community and warmth and relaxation and enjoyment into the painting. And I thought the sky was a little dark. I wanted to brighten up the clouds, so I'm just scumbling on with a filbert brush some white paint, and it's basically, you're just kind of like catching the edges of the texture of the canvas with that brush, and it's just kind of giving the clouds a little bit more brightness and texture, and I'm using the larger brush there towards the top of the painting to give the clouds a little bit more puff and give us a better perspective. And that's pretty much all there is to this painting. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you check out our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com. They have all the supplies I used today and wonderful prices, and I'll put a coupon code in the video description too. Thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go, and until next time, happy crafting.